And thank you, Council, for your consideration of this notice of motion. 1 in 3 Calgarians is a visible minority, and forecasts show that that will continue to increase. Our city is the 3rd most diverse in the country behind Toronto and Vancouver. In the July committee meeting of Community and Protective Services, we heard from an incredibly broad section of this demographic, from construction workers to lawyers, nurses to students, who came to tell their stories and experiences of interactions not only with the Calgary Police Service, but what it's like to live in their communities. I'm sorry, can you hear me there, Your Worship?
Sorry, I turned my mic off, but yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. We have since then continued to hear this feedback. This diverse community is engaged in this work. Calgary Police Commission's latest citizen satisfaction survey has identified the challenges with police engagement and community perceptions around how the police service engages with citizens from our Black, Indigenous, and other visible minority communities. This didn't start in July. The lived experience for many of our citizens and their struggles have been taking place for generations. What started in July, though, was our public acknowledgement that racism exists in our institutions and in our government, and it is important that we not only make statements, but take meaningful steps to respond. This notice of motion isn't even that action. It is a request for our administration to work with the Calgary Police Service to develop a framework for our budget process at the end of this month that would put a decision in front of Council about potentially making investments and taking action that a significant portion of our citizens have asked us to do. Administration has said they can accomplish this, and so has the Calgary Police Service. If we want to see how we can share these resources, who our partners might be, if you want more information to support the notice of motion we passed unanimously, and if you want to support the police and to support our citizens in Council, please support this work. Councillor Farkas and others who have said this is defunding the police, for Councillor Farkas and others who have said this is defunding the police, I would ask you to be honest, to be truthful. You have falsely claimed that your removal from the Police Commission, amongst other misleading comments. These words are like weapons, Councillor Farkas, and for someone who is seeking to lead this city and all its citizens, I would expect you to be honest and to cease this fear-mongering. We have seen a president of the United States stoke fear and hate that has torn that country apart these past 4 years, and as an active strategy that I hope with all my heart will be put to bed tonight. Councillor Farkas and Chu and Maglioka made a motion at budget last year to cut the police budget by 5%. Was that defunding the police? Because we are asking that we share resources in a time of very limited resources to support crisis services for vulnerable individuals, their families, and support networks, to support outreach services and the emergency response system in Calgary, including any gaps in racially and culturally appropriate services, all of which support the work of our frontline officers today. Is that defunding the police? When the province cut $13 million from the police budget last year, that is 30% more than what we have proposed right now. Was that defunding the police? Councillor Colley-Urquhart, you are working on the mental health and addiction strategy along with the Mayor's office. Council made a historic investment in one-time money that will run out in 2022. Close to 500 people died of opioid overdoses in the first 6 months of this year alone. Those numbers are awful. Just imagine the strain that this puts on our Calgary Police Service. Is our reallocating money to support this defunding the police? Words are like weapons, and when we use them to stoke fear, they divide us. Some of us are okay with that. Some of us have made careers out of this. This approach is comparable to what the police themselves have submitted for this year, but it will go further next year. This will not deeply impact the police budget, but it will allow some transformative work to support the big demographic of Calgarians who have asked for this. I'm watching the election on the side of my desk tonight. I hope to God Donald Trump loses this election and will be replaced by Joseph Biden, who said something that Councillor Farkas often quotes: "Don't tell me what you value, show me your budget and I will tell you what you value." Even if this very small request is supported at the end of the month at budget, the police budget will remain by far our largest line item, and our social and preventative supports budgets will remain extremely small, but it is a meaningful step towards supporting our community. I thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions or suggestions in my close.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Craw. All right, now it is on the table. Councillor Gondek?
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you very much for that opening, Councillor Woolley. I won't speak for too long, but I will speak to what is before us and why I believe that it is not completely out of line with what's happening. So as a member of commission, I'm not at liberty to talk about the financial discussions that are held preceding the budget submission that comes in. I'm also not at liberty to discuss anything that we've talked about in closed session leading up to that budget submission. But I can tell you that as one of your representatives on commission, I took to heart the anti-racism hearings and what people had to say. I took council's requests to heart, and when I went into those closed sessions, I relayed what I heard in this chamber. I can tell you that I worked very closely with Deputy Chief McClellan, along with Executive Director Spicer and Chair Croft, to set up a meeting with Acting Manager GM Dalgleish, City Solicitor Flowen, and General Manager Black to understand how we could better work together between administration, Calgary Police Commission, and Calgary Police Service. That was back in early summer, might have been June or July, I can't remember the exact date, but I can tell you that we found out that the actual liaison between the police service and commission and administration was the city solicitor. And it was a decision made back in the day when Jeff Fielding was here because there were some concerns about respectful workplace. We also determined with administration that perhaps that wasn't the best point of contact moving forward, and GM Katie Black was appointed to be the liaison, which I think is the perfect person at this point in time. So I can tell you that those conversations revealed a desire for all parties to make sure that we are creating the types of partnerships that are best serving Calgarians. And to the wording that's in this notice of motion, developing a community safety investment framework, that's a great title for the conversations that have already been started between Deputy Chief McClellan and General Manager Black. I can tell you that they've been having conversations about the police services submission. They've been closely connected with the chair of the Finance and Audit Committee. They've been in close contact with the chief and Chair Croft as well. And when you see the submissions publicly that are coming for budget from Police Service and Police Commission, I think this council will understand that your requests and your desires were taken very seriously. I've also had conversations with the Defund to Fund Coalition, and as I've said in a blog post, I will state it again here, people are not asking for abolition of the police. That is not the goal. The goal is to create a system whereby Calgary Police Service can develop strong partnerships with organizations and agencies that it needs to work with in order to take care of Calgarians. The police service recognizes that it can't always be the only one to respond to calls, and they value the relationships they've built with people like the DOPE team and PACT. So the police service is actively wishing to build those relationships and solidify them. Councillor Woolley, I appreciate the fact that you've made it clear that Calgary Police Service should be part of developing that framework. And I appreciate the fact that in your last point you say, consider a reallocation of up to $10 million. I think those are good guidelines. They're not too specific. And again, without revealing too much of what I know that I can't say yet, I think council will be pleased to see what comes forward from the police during our budget deliberations. I'm happy to support this as a result.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gondek. Councillor Keating, I'm going to put myself on this list somewhere, but we'll go to probably at the end. I'll go to Councillor Keating next.
Thank you, Worship. I just have a couple of questions, and
and I believe it's been floated around, but have the Police Commission or the CPS looked at some reallocation of their own?
So you'll recall in September, Councillor Keating, that when they came to us, they themselves suggested that some reallocation would be appropriate. You will receive their budget submission with the budget on, well, you're going to get it on the weekend and it gets revealed publicly on Monday. However, I believe that they have sent a memo to members of council with their thinking. I know I got it. I assume everybody did. And so...
10 pages of it.
Sorry?
10 pages of it.
Yeah. And so I can say enough that they are following through with what they talked about in September.
Okay. Yes. And I just wanted that out here so that we actually knew that this was being suggested by CPS as well. My question is on the 10 million in 21 and another 10 million in 22. I'm not sure that there's been any indication of a further amount that could be reduced in 22 that would give us that 5% that's been floated around. I would like to float out an idea that if we are looking at it, I would hate to go too fast and too rash in a reduction in a budget, considering a number of the things that we're dealing with in there. But is there a possibility that we may consider the first 10 million and then we may supplement second 10 million from the FSR to really give it kind of a 2-year pilot project and evaluate all the data and things that would come from there, rather than us going ahead and asking for 20 million from CPS themselves?
Thanks, Councillor Keating. What I would suggest is that on the notice of motion before you, and I'll play my card a little bit here, which is Councillor Woolley and I had a lot of, what's a polite way of putting it, extremely heated conversations about what this notice of motion was and what should be in it.
Spirited.
And it's very spirited. I didn't know some of the words that I learned from Councillor Woolley. But in the end, this is not actually saying take the money from any particular place. As Councillor Woolley pointed out in his open, what this is saying is go think about how you might spend this amount of money as kind of a target, but ultimately council will have to decide, do you want to spend this kind of money, and what is the source of this money? Does it come from the police budget or somewhere else at budget time? So I think that your point would be a very good idea to bring up at budget time if indeed council wants to spend the money but doesn't want to take it from the police base budget. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, but Your Worship, the reason I'm asking that is because if you look at the very last line in the last, and further be it resolved, it says a further 10 million in 22 to the base budget from the existing police budget to support. So there's my issue, Your Worship, is I think what we're doing here is exactly the right thing. I believe that we have to establish a better method or a better way of dealing with addictions and mental health and a number of these. And I'm quite positive that sending officers in a car in uniforms and everything is not the best solution. But this notice of motion budget, and that's where, even though it says consider, it indicates from the police budget. And I don't mind us looking at it, and what you were talking about is if the CPS comes forward with something and we would like to supplement it, to give us that 2-year cushion, I think that's great. Coming back, that last line gives me trouble, Your Worship.
Okay, let's go through the lights and see if we can figure out a way to move forward. And I see Councillor Farkas is going to propose an amendment as well. So let's run forward and see if we get some thoughts on that. Meanwhile, I'll think myself about maybe a better way to say, because I know what's meant by that line, at least I think I do. And let me see if I can figure out a better way to say it. Okay.
If I have to come back and ask for an amendment to that, then I will. You'll recognize me, Your Worship.
Yes, of course. All right, Councillor Maglioka, please.
Thank you. I was wondering if Councillor Willie will ask, did he talk to the police chief or the police department about if that we remove about 10-20 $20 million out of the budget. What is it going to cost? What it's going to do? Do we lose more memberships? Do we lose more police officers, boots on the ground? How did he come up with that kind of a figure? And you know what? When I try to put a 5% reduction on the police department, they said, no, you can't do that because we're going to lose a lot of members and the streets are going to be done safe. So I just want to know where that is right now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask Councillor Woolley to address that in his close. Councillor Farrell, please.
Thank you, Councillor Woolley, for bringing this forward. I've been on council for going on 20 years now, and a constant is that although we knew the root causes of crime, we talked about them often: poverty, trauma, mental health, race, addiction, and that investing on prevention saves not just money, but saves lives. We continued as a society to woefully underfund it. And in the meantime, every year at budget, the police budget was left untouched or boosted. And it's unreasonable to expect police to respond to the different types of crises that they confront. They themselves admit it. Those are not criminal in nature, but mental health in nature. And yet we continue to underfund the programs that are so desperately needed to make the difference. So how do we break this cycle? At some point, you have to say something's got to give. If you don't want to add millions and millions to the budget, you've got to take it from somewhere. And we're talking a fraction of the police budget. And so with adequate resources, we know that there are partnerships and programs that are so well positioned to respond to the needs of Calgarians, the real needs of Calgarians. We know with programs like the Icelandic model, Project Youth, that we can make a difference if we get involved with children when they're younger. So please, let's proceed with this. This is a sea change. It's because I think we finally realized that after all these years that we were going down the wrong path. So I'm very excited about this motion, and I really want to thank you, Councillor Woolley, for being brave enough to bring it forward.
Thank you very much. Ms. Floan is just going to be our lane departure warning again.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to remind members of council of the discussion that we had back in September during the discussion with Police Commission and the police chief, and that's section 27 and 29 of the Police Act. So just a reminder that because the City of Calgary has a municipal police force, under section 27, the municipality is required to establish and maintain a, quote, adequate and effective municipal police service. And under section 29, when it comes to establishing the budget, council may obtain information from the commission necessary to enable it to assess the efficiency and financing requirements of the police service. And then council is simply responsible for establishing the total budget, and the commission will be responsible for allocating. So the really important concepts there are ensuring that there is an adequate and effective municipal police service, and that council may ask questions around the efficiency and financing requirements of the police service. So I'll just leave you with that.
Thanks, Ms. Floan. And in fact, I'm glad you mentioned that at the moment you did, because I've also been thinking about Councillor Keating's concern and what I think Councillor Woolley and Carra are intending with that last line. So I do have some proposed new language which may satisfy both your concern and Councillor Keating's concern, and Councillor Woolley says it's okay. So, and Madam Clerk, no need to write it down. I'll flip it to you in a moment. But it's to change that last line to consider the allocation of $10 million in 2020 and $10 million in 2021 in base budget to the implementation of this framework with an assessment of the impact of reallocating from the police budget and other sources. So the reason they're talking about reallocation of the police budget in that line is because they want to answer Councillor Maglioka's question of what would this do to the police budget as part of this work, but it's not necessarily saying to reallocate those funds. So the language that I'm proposing would allow you to answer Councillor Maglioka's question without tripping on what Ms. Floan is talking about. So thought as we go through the rest of the folks, but I will send that to the clerk and get it up on the screen as well. Councillor Farrell? Sorry, you just spoke. I'm sorry. Councillor, you were so brilliant, I just wanted to hear it again. Councillor Carra.
Thank you. I mean, my debate was really going to be what has just been procedurally worked out. Thank you very much for the work, Evan and your worship, and the spiritedness with which this work was undertaken. What we're doing here is our job as council in the lead up to budget. We've met with the police. We have all agreed we are tackling systemic racism. We are moving to an anti-racist stance. And all parties are agreed that a reallocation of budget is necessary because the police are responding to non-policing matters. The question is, how can we responsibly reallocate that budget? How can we defund to fund responsibly? That's what this notice of motion in advance of our budget deliberations asks to do. We need to understand what's this going to do to the police. We need to understand where the money is going to go in the community and how we can most effectively put it in the community to address the systemic racism that we're not addressing through policing as business as usual. So this is a necessary step in what we've all agreed to do. And I thank Council for your thoughtfulness in this regard. We need this information to do our jobs with regard to approving the ultimate police budget in the context of our city budget. So please support this, and let's tone down the rhetoric and realize we're all pulling together on this one because it's critical. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Councillor Farkas, please.
Thank you, Worship. Do we have Carla Mail on the line by chance?
I don't know. Are you there, Ms. Mail?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. I was wondering, are the police the majority of the City of Calgary's budget?
Councillor Farkas, the police have a budget of about $410 to $15 million. In terms of a service line, they are the largest service line.
Sorry, could you just repeat that?
Councillor Farkas, they have a budget, I believe, and so I would need to confirm it with you. They have a budget of about $410 to $415 million. So in terms of a service line, they're a significant service line for us.
But they would not be a majority of the city budget?
They are not more than 50% of the total city budget, that's right.
Would it be fair to say they're approximately 10 to 15% of the city budget overall, assuming the about a $4 billion base?
So our total budget is about $4 billion. It's both self-supported and tax-supported. And so if you're considering it as part of the total, including self-supported, it's about 10%. But there's about $2 billion worth of tax-supported, and the police are primarily tax-supported.
And are they the large item overall, exceeding spending on transit?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Is the police as a line item the largest line item, exceeding others such as transit?
Councillor Farkas, I would need to go and double check that question.
Okay, thanks. Maybe we can come back to that. And then my next question is, have we increased the police budget from 2018 to 2019, or was it actually reduced in absolute terms?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Farkas. There have been reductions over time, but they were reductions to increases, and my recollection is there's an increase overall.
Okay, thank you. Council, the reason I'm asking these questions, I'm just reviewing the City of Calgary's annual report, and it clearly sets out that even in absolute terms, the spending on the city police as a line item has gone down from 2018 to 2019, nor are they even the largest line item, let alone a majority line item. I'll just begin by saying it's disappointing for a council that claims to value getting accurate information out to Calgarians that this council would want to have this debate under the cover of darkness after 2 12-hour meetings and on the U.S. election night. So I certainly support addressing gaps in crisis services, bolstering outreach services, and strengthening the emergency response system in Calgary. I'm pleased after some of the movers of this motion, such as Councillor Woolley, voted against my motion last year to increase the spending to the DOPE team. I'm really pleased to see you come around to want to support agencies like this. Our police are not the ever-growing and majority expense line item that they're portrayed to be. Policing only accounts for about 13% of city expenses, and again, was significantly cut from 2018 to 2019. And again, it bears repeating that the police spending has held flat and even declined despite population growth of our city, the opening of the safe consumption site downtown, the resurgence of organized crime, and the spike in social disorder and violence brought on by deep economic hardship. The great irony here, Council, is that continued cuts set back the very reforms that many of you are demanding. A drastically defunded service is not only unable to keep Calgarians safe, but it's also less able to reform. Consider recent calls to increase diversity in hiring and bring on Indigenous liaison officers. Recent recruit classes have seen great increases in gender and racial representation. So in a seniority environment, these layoff directives would disproportionately impact those new graduates who, at the same time, are perhaps most eager to change culture. Otherwise, nearly 90% of the police budget is people. Cuts could be further directed to so-called discretionary line items such as education, training, or the system improvements relating to the body-worn camera program. But again, reductions in these areas would run very counter to public safety objectives and would further set up our community and our police to fail. So at this time, I'd like to attempt an amendment. And the amendment would, if you don't mind just putting up on the screen, it would be to proceed with the safety investment framework, but upfronting the commitments from the Fiscal Stability Reserve. So I think that there's something of value here in this motion, so long as that safety investment framework is front-ended. I agree that the police can't be the be-all agency, and I agree that investment in prevention will reduce our long-term costs. But massive front-end cuts to the police is like scrapping an airplane in flight for parts. It's just not going to work. So, Council, I hope that you can support this amendment, and I'm happy to answer your questions in my close on the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Chu. You're seconding this amendment?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, on the amendment, Councillor Sutherland?
Thank you. Some of the issue I have right now, even with the amendment, is that we're just taking a arbitrary number, whether it's a percentage or 10 million, and say this is what we need to accomplish another objective through mental health and addressing it in a different way, where we haven't really established what can we do, how can we deal with the mental health issues and service so the police don't have to, who does it require, and what would actually cost. So I have issue at, I agree that we should go and look at it and deal with it differently, but I really have an issue just with the dollar amount, because I don't know if 10 million is enough. Maybe it's 30 million. Maybe it's 5 million. I have absolutely no idea, but I don't even know what the solution is. So I'm not sure why we're throwing a dollar amount at this problem without actually determining what a path would be or how we can execute what we need to execute. So I'm not going to support taking any money out of anywhere, but I'll support how we're going to do this. Let's figure it out how much it's going to cost, and then figure out where the source should come from. Because I'm not sure if we're going to be throwing this money away and it's going to be productive to what the end outcome that we all want. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sutherland. When it comes time, I will. Oh, I'm hearing some background noise. Please hit mute. When it comes time, I will call that last bit separately for you if that's what you're asking. Let's go to Councillor Woolley, please.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and Council. Obviously, I won't be supporting this. Despite Councillor Farkas's efforts, I've been working in cobbling together one-time money for the DOPE team every year since the year that I was elected. I have been advocating for their work for years before I was elected, and what our problem is that we kind of throw some of this one-time money at what we know are ongoing problems. And maybe I'll just take this minute. So please, Council, don't support this. And remember, the amendment that I'm hoping Councillor Keating will make will say to the police budget or other sources, but we can't throw one-time money because it is one-time money. It will not last. We need this work to be ongoing, and it's important work that will support the police service. But to your point, Councillor Sutherland, it is a good point. We know that the need is great, but as we looked at this number, it was basically around some of the capacity within the community in terms of preventative services, support, some of the things that the police are working on, some of the recommendations that we think that we can expect from them. It wasn't pulled out of thin air. It was thought about at high level detail, but part of the framework is that it will get us some more detail on what is our capacity as a community to get it out the door. We know the need is much greater than the 10 million this year, but it is something that we know there is need on the ground. We know that there is capacity within the community to deal with this, and we know that there's capacity within the police budget to deal with this. And so, again, this is going to be, for the most part, a request for information, but the framework will answer a lot of the questions that you have, Councillor Sutherland. Please don't support this one-time money. It is not a good use of money and won't support the work that Council unanimously asked for.
Thank you very much, Councillor Woolley. Let us go to Councillor Gondek, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will not be supporting this amendment for a very simple reason. I'm telling you, as your former representative on Police Commission, that Commission and the service and me took your direction very seriously this summer and in September, asking CPS to look at their budget and see what ideas they could come up with to reallocate some of their funding if they thought there was a way they could better partner with programs within community and neighborhood services or external programs to see how their money might be allocated in a different way to support strong partnerships. That work was done over the last few months. So while I appreciate that everyone wants to talk about all the great work they've done, I can tell you as your representative from Police Commission that they have done a lot of work on this. And until you see what they are bringing you in their budget submission, you can't really weigh in on how much money we're going to need to supplement, whether they can achieve this, what it looks like at all. So this is guidance to Council to consider an amount up to this amount. And the amendment that I believe Councillor Keating is going to bring talks about either from the CPS budget or other sources or a combination or whatever it happens to be. I would also say that you need to take very seriously that GM Black, Deputy Chief McClellan, and Ms. Mayle met to talk about the budget and see how that reallocation might work. Just because you can't see the results yet doesn't mean the work hasn't been done. It's been done. And I want to remind Council as well that last year, Council Colley-Urquhart and I found money within the corporate programs account that supplemented police, fire, and transit, essentially, so that we could keep ourselves at a 0% increase. And we allocated those funds not only for this budget cycle, but for the next one. So we've got that money available to us. We've got that funding source. So this is not difficult to achieve the way that it was presented in the first place with the amendment that Councillor Keating is proposing to bring. You don't need to support this. I can tell you the work's been done. Thank you.
Thank you. Let us go to Councillor Keating, please.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, no, if this fails, I certainly will bring an amendment that allows the CPS or the police force to participate. I think that's crucial. If we're talking about fixing a situation where they have played an important role over for a number of years, we can't eliminate them. We can't say that you have no part, we're going to get funds from somewhere else. We have to work in that partnership hand in hand. And I think we have to allow them to give the opportunity, if they see fit, the ability to say, yeah, we can help you out. We can take money from other sources, and we can see what the police force would be willing to give. The only problem I had with the first one is it seemed to indicate let's take it all from the police budget, and I think we have to change the wording, make it open. So I will make that one as soon as this one fails, Your Worship.
If it fails. Thank you, Councillor Keating. Let's go to Councillor Craw, please.
Well, I'm glad I have another opportunity to speak, because in my attempt to be brief earlier, I didn't thank Councillor Gondek also for her work and for, I think, appropriately framing what's before us. The first question I have, Your Worship, is are we attempting to amend something that's already been amended through a friendly process? I thought that...
No, because it was quite a big amendment, so I thought that we should let it stand, and Councillor Keating has agreed to put that forward. Okay,
so, I mean, this is an attempt to get in something that Council's already agreed to move.
Well, so Council hasn't quite agreed yet, so it's totally legit.
Okay, but well, then all I can say is let's not support this, because this is not even what... Let's not support this. Let's go and be very thoughtful about what we're going to do. And if I can just hit one more point again, the police have done a bunch of work, and we're going to see it when they give us our budget submission. What we need to do, and this is, I think, Councillor Woolley answered Councillor Sutherland very well. What we need to do is we need to figure out how, if money frees up from the police, or we feel like it needs to free up from some other funding location, how can we spend it effectively? And this is what that work is about. It's our side of the ledger as we talk about budget. The only other thing I want to note is that there is a power in symbols, and a percentage cut of the police in an international setting where we're talking about Calgary being an anti-racist place and the kind of place where you want to raise your kid no matter where you come from. This is a powerful statement internationally as we look to position ourselves on the world stage as a great Canadian place to make a great Western Canadian life. So it's about figuring out where the money can go, but it's also about making powerful and important statements about our values.
Thank you. All right, let us go to Councillor Davison, please.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm always confused by the narrative that the mover has here. We've heard under the cover of darkness. I got to apologize because I'm sorry that this might be your first big kid job, but it does take a lot of effort and time.
Councillor Davison.
Well, I think it gets...
No, keep the personal attacks coming. If you don't have a better argument, go for it.
Well, I guess I would say that it's cut, spend, and for somebody who positioned 5% across the board repeatedly and is now looking to take money out of the FSR to put towards something we really have no plan for, I guess I'm a little bit perplexed as to to how we're spinning the narrative on this. You know, decisions are all important to someone, and I think the biggest problem we have here is, you know, when things get flown on the floor of council like this, it totally disables us from having a rational conversation about putting an actual plan forward. And so I'm not going to support this. I don't even know if I'll support Councillor Woolley's motion, but I'm willing to listen to it, and I'm willing to be open to it instead of using, you know, what I would call dramatic rhetoric to create more spin.
All right, thanks, Councillor Davison. Let's go to Councillor Chahal. Oh, Chahal, you're on the main?
Yes, Your Worship, I am on the main, and I won't be supporting the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Let us go to Councillor Farkas to close on the amendment, please.
Thank you, Worship. Just to respond to Councillor Sutherland, I think you have a great point in terms of where the $10 million comes from. I've not seen any due diligence on that number or any scoping on it. Simply, I'm trying to make this motion less worse to at least limit the impact that it'll have in terms of further reductions to the police. Again, Council, massive front-end cuts to the police is like scrapping the airplane in flight for parts. It's not going to work. Clumsy and dangerous attempts to appease extremists will only serve to undermine safety and set us back.
Question of
So
privilege, Your
I hope
Worship.
that I can earn
I
your
take
support.
offense to those remarks. It's a complete misrepresentation of what's happening here. I will not sit here and listen to a colleague that sat on commission with me misrepresent what we are trying to do. No one is trying to appeal to extremist groups. I will not tolerate that language at all in this council chamber. Will not.
That is well taken, Councillor Gondek. Please, again, it's not the provincial legislature, the House of Commons. We don't ascribe motive here. So go ahead, Councillor Farkas.
No,
Thank you, Worship.
Mayor
I want to repeat again.
No, Mayor Nenshi, point of privilege.
Yes.
That wasn't sufficient. I want to withdraw.
Okay, I think you're right, Councillor
It's
Farkas.
not an accurate point of privilege. She wasn't mentioned.
Councillor Farkas, I'm going to ask you to withdraw that comment.
Which comment in particular?
The one that this is only to appease activists.
What I will repeat is what I said, which was
he did not say activists.
Excuse me, extremists.
And dangerous attempts to appease extremists will only serve to undermine safety and set us back. And I stand by that remark.
Are you, Councillor Farkas, are you implying that that is what your colleagues are trying to do here? Or are you being hypothetical?
We have a motion in front of us. I'm trying to reduce what I feel to be the
No, I'm asking you about that statement, Councillor Farkas. What did you mean by that statement? And if in fact you will not withdraw it, then I'm afraid I'm going to cut off your mic.
The statement stands on its own.
Okay, then you're done. Thank you. We will go to the vote
Your
on this
Worship,
amendment, please.
no. I'm not happy about this. Where in the procedural bylaw do you get to do that?
Well, if he's not going to withdraw the remark, I can't let it stand, Councillor Demong. I can't let him continue because the question of privilege was well taken by the chair. So
question of privilege was not well taken. It wasn't a personal attack on her.
I took it as well taken. You can challenge the chair if you like.
Your Worship, if I may, it's on page 41 of 46 of the procedure bylaw. It's under secondary motions, D2, number 1, question of privilege. It talks about an individual member being misquoted as an example. I would say that that is a complete misquote, indicating that the reason that this notice of motion is before us is because we are trying to appease extremists. That's how I interpreted the procedure bylaw. I thought I should explain.
Thank you. And as the chair, I accept that question of privilege. That is well taken. So with that, we will go to the vote. Can you open the e-vote, please?
Councillor Chu and Councillor Woolley.
Just voted.
Yeah, we got it. Thanks.
No. No.
So there are more than 3 in opposition. I'll
Call the roll, please. This is on the amendment.
Councillor Keating.
No.
Councillor Maglioka.
Yes.
Councillor Sutherland.
No.
Sorry, Councillor Sutherland, I didn't catch that.
No.
Thank you. Councillor Woolley.
No.
Councillor Carra.
No.
Councillor Chahal.
No.
Councillor Chu.
Yes.
Councillor Collier-Cart.
No.
Councillor Davison.
No.
Councillor Dumont.
Yes.
Councillor Farkas.
Yes.
Councillor Farrell.
No.
Councillor Gondek.
Nope.
Mayor Nenshi.
No.
Lost, Your Worship, 410.
Thank you. I'm going to assume, Council, that you want to finish this item this evening, so we will trek through. I'm actually going to change the speakers list a little bit and allow Councillor Keating to put his amendment next to avoid some confusion here, and then we will continue the speakers list. Councillor Keating, please go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. And I'm glad that part of the last amendment was followed basically my words from when I first spoke. But the issue is still, we have many partners in this, I won't call it a game, but in this process to try and fix many of the things that may be wrong within society at this point. We have to allow all those players to come to the table. We've had discussions with the police force and the police commission, and they're willing to say we can help, but we have to look at it in many aspects. So I believe the clerk has the amendment, and if that could be put up, basically it states that let's look at the 10 million and the 10 million, because we have to start somewhere. And yes, we're not sure if this is the right amount right now, but it gives us a great starting point, and it allows the police commission and the police service to come forward and say, we can help you out with possibly X number of dollars, and then we will find the remaining from another source, and we can identify that at a later time. But this opens the door for partnership, willingness to work together, and still getting the job done, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Keating. Do I have a seconder for this?
I'll second. Councillor Woolley.
Thanks, Councillor Woolley. Any discussion on this amendment? I don't see any, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I just have a question, Your Worship. In the original, it said to consider the reallocation of up to 10 million, and now we're calling it an allocation. Are we just...
Oh, I forgot the up to.
Okay.
The up to should be in there.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Just throw an up to before the 10 million, please. And it's really funny because Councillor Woolley and I had a big fight over those two words, and I left them out, even though I was the one pushing them in. All right, thank you. I don't see anyone else on the amendment, so why don't we call the roll on the amendment? Oh, is there a mistake?
Allocation or reallocation?
No, it should be allocation, because the reallocation comes in the next sentence. Okay? All right, let's call the roll on that, please.
On the amendment before you, Councillor Chahal.
Yes.
Councillor Chu.
Yes.
Councillor Collier-Cart.
No.
Councillor Davison.
Yes.
Councillor Dumont.
No.
Councillor Farkas.
No.
Councillor Farrell.
Yes.
Councillor Gondek.
Yes.
Councillor Keating.
Yes.
Councillor Maglioka.
No.
Councillor Sutherland.
No.
Councillor Woolley.
Yes.
Councillor Carra.
Yes.
Mayor Nenshi.
Yes.
It's carried, Your Worship, 9-5.
Thank you very much. All right. Let us go back to our debate on the main, and I've got Councillor Chu next.
Thank you, Worship. During the satisfaction survey, the police has 85% of support, thinking they're doing a great job. Council, not so much, at low 30s. And it's been said by the mover about minorities. And I am a minority, and I was also a police officer. I can tell you, this seems like it's a deja vu over and over again. Is that CPS is leading in diversity. Calgary City Police has a diversity resource unit probably over 30 years ago, way before my time, and never stopped. Still there today, still leading in the country. And when some people said, "Yeah, we saw the videos of a police officer has doing the wrong thing and got caught on video, allegedly, because everybody's innocent before court, and the police officer we saw is being charged, and that shows you the system is working. They got caught. Right? The system put in place is working, and I would tell you right now, as a former police officer, the good policemen, we don't like bad apples. And as being said, I agree too, is that a lot of calls the police officer maybe don't need to attend, but I can tell you right now, a lot of mental health calls, they end up calling the police anyway. Just like a EMS, when they attend a lot of calls, they will not go in until the police clear the scene first. I think somebody else is talking, Your Worship.
No, we can hear you fine.
Okay. And I will tell you right now, any other time, I will agree that the police can be more efficient, and they should too. And I will even tell you as where to cut, because I know. And I also heard that, I just saw it yesterday or the day before, that the police has canceled the recruit class, and which is dangerous. And Your Worship, as people keep talking, I can't whispering, I can't.
Oh no, we can totally hear you. I'm not hearing anything in the. I'm not hearing anything in the background. But please keep going.
Okay, and but now I think this is just riding the coattail of misguided ideology of defunding the police, and I really believe that. And I also think that this just a small, it seems always this way, it's a very small, palatable step toward the end goal of defunding the police. And we just heard that. You would think the whole goal here is do something for the mental health, and but we see that it's supposed to be the goal, but it's not. The movers actually want to take money out of police instead to reach the goal, because the counselors, and now we have two counselors, amendment that will reach this goal, but the mover says no. So this is nothing but defund the police to me. Thank you, and obviously I'm going to vote no to this.
Thank you, Councillor Chu. We'll go to Councillor Davison, please.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I'm glad we're talking about reallocation, and for me, and why I think I'm willing to explore this is to look at, but where. I'm not interested in defunding the police, but I am interested in funding the appropriate resources. And some of the questions that go through my head are, if CPS are no longer responsible from dealing with mental health or suicide response, who goes? And, who then becomes the proper agency to respond to a 911 call? And I've had, a good conversation with Councillor Woolley over this. CPS responds to 100% of the calls to 911 from, say, EMS for safety concerns. And so we need to look at how we could potentially fund an alternate agency. And if we did fund that alternate agency, we'd have to somewhat ensure that they're not calling in CPS every time for a safety presence, which is what a lot of the reason they go to certain calls is for. But the bigger question is how do we work with the province or whoever it may be to create an accredited institution that can respond to critical incidents, whether it comes in through 911 or otherwise. And I think, the DOPE team, for example, does a great job of that. But how do you fund a proper agency that if a 911 call came in and didn't, say, necessarily require Calgary Police, that we would have that sort of ancillary agency to go to work and do the job here, right? Because to some degree, a lot of the safety presence is a big reason why CPS goes to any of these things. And I think it doesn't take us very long back in history to remember that, mental health workers going to wellness checks were, being beaten, female counselors were being raped, there were people killed. You only have to go back, recently to the doctor in Red Deer who was slashed to death. This was somebody who was trying to work with a very unstable individual over time, and unfortunately, that the safety presence there wasn't called in when it probably should have. And so, I guess I can support this today because I'm interested in finding out what that agency is and how we do this. I don't think this is just solely a police problem. We need to figure out what the proper agency to respond will be in certain situations. And I think it's a much broader conversation. So I'm interested to see where this goes. I'm happy to have a look at it today. I don't think this is the end-all be-all. I think this is a good start to the conversation. But I don't think it's as simple as saying, reallocate or defund the police. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Davison. I'm just going through my list here. Councillor Sutherland, have you spoken on the main?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chahal on the main.
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you. And I've been listening very carefully to the conversation. I want to thank Councillor Gondak made some great remarks earlier on explaining the work that she's done and what they've done in the Police Commission over the last number of months. So it's quite encouraging, and I want to thank her for her work there. And just to Councillor Davidson, there are programs. A Cahoots program in Eugene, Oregon is a program that's diverted thousands of calls from policing. And I think that's a model essentially, right in a jurisdiction quite close to us where we can look at and see the benefits of a model like that to divert calls from the police to an agency that can help support people in need. I think I heard something about how can we spend this money effectively? What type of programming? What does reallocation look like? The way I see it is we're doing quite a bit of work on the Public Safety Task Force, and we're doing a tremendous amount of engagement. I've learned a lot, and I know all the people in our task force have brought a lot of great ideas forward. But a part of this is supporting programs and looking at new initiatives like Cahoots or the DOPE team here locally. But the big thing is that I've seen is that Councillor Woolley touched on his opening. Our city's changed. The programs needed to address the needs are different than what they used to be. The police service is doing much more work in areas they probably shouldn't be, or they need further support and when it comes to crime prevention. And they need to be culturally appropriate. They have a number of great community-based programs, such as Maston Yard, which are over capacity. There's too many people needing those services. The Center for Newcomers has a Real Me program. I believe they have 40 people in the program, and they have 40 or 50 youth waiting on a gang prevention program. So these are just some of the initiatives where a diversion of funds could be made to help support the programs that we have. And there's many other great initiatives out there. And I think all this is rather than getting into the inflammatory rhetoric of the defund and cuts. Nobody that's looked at this has talked about defunding. It's really been about who's the right agency to do the work and help people in need. And I think this is changing the policing model, and we should be open to change and be innovative and go back to a model of policing working with community. We need the carrot and we need the stick to get the results we need to have a safe community. So I want to thank Councillor Woolley for bringing this notice of motion forward. I'm happy to have my name on it and happy to support it. And I know that our task force will be bringing information to council, maybe even an update later this year, and we'll have recommendations coming forward that can be used to help support the work that's done in this notice of motion as we move forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's go to Councillor Demong, please.
Well, much to Councillor Davison's points, I understand that there is a desire to set these programs up and to have it as an annual or recurring funding. I'm not entirely sure why it has to be specifically coming out of the police budget. If we want to create programs and ongoing programs, we've done this for many years. We do it all the time. We create a program and we fund it. Why does it specifically have to have a negative impact on the police budget in that respect? The other side of this conversation that I seem to see lacking in the entire conversation is the lack of support from the provincial government. These items that we're talking about are almost specifically and exclusively under the domain of AHS and the provincial government. And yet we seem to be more than willing to step into this area over and over, putting tens of millions of dollars that are basically subsidizing the provincial government. So these are some of my concerns.
Thank you. All right, I think that is it. Let us go to Councillor Woolley to close, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for all of that feedback. When I was a kid growing up, for a couple of years, my mom was a support worker for Child and Family Services, the provincial organization. And her job was to attend family disputes where she had to pull the kids out of the house. And she would attend those calls beside two police officers. And that was tough work. I remember the stress that put on her. And she was trained for that. And to Councillor Davison's point, she couldn't have done that alone. And the police couldn't have done that without her. And for me, that's what this is about. You know, the dope team in the downtown, the police will pick up some vulnerable individuals who would normally have gone into the tank, the drunk tank, or into a holding cell overnight, which is incredibly expensive. But instead, the police take them to Alpha House, where they have a lot of supports for a way cheaper price. They get some of the service that they need by professionals who know what they need, and the police and the Alpha House work incredibly closely together. And Councillor Demong, you bring up a good point. But the problem with the province not stepping in is it ends up being our cost anyway, because we are responsible for the police. And so, in fact, we are spending a ton of money sending police officers to call who don't have the training to do this kind of work. We're asking our officers to do too much and taking them away from the things that they're trained for. And this long-term absolutely will have to be better partnerships between Alberta Health Services and other provincial resources. But in that time, and in that go-between time, this is our challenge in our city and with our police service, and a police service that has come to the table and acknowledged that there's systemic racism, acknowledged that there is shared accountability and responsibility, and at a time when our resources are stretched extremely thin, when the police budgets have had less cuts than everything else in this city, that they're showing a willingness to partner and to share resources because they will benefit from using some of their budget to support the needs that the community has asked us for. These are not extremists. If Chima Nicodirum, the mayor's former chief of staff who came and spoke to this issue, spoke to getting pat down, and spoke to the importance of reallocation, if Chima's an extremist, then, well, goddamn, we are all extremists. One of the really deeply troubling things that I remember in those hearings was when we heard from student after student how many problems, particularly Black and Indigenous students, had with community resource officers. And that made me feel awful because for a couple of years, the police were actually going to cut the service from Western Canada High School and share one community resource officer. And I fought to get that covered off, because my experience with community resource officers as, you know, the white skateboard drama kid was different than that a lot of kids are experiencing today.
You're just at time, Councillor Woolley, so I'll ask you to wrap up, please.
With that, I appreciate all the questions, and I appreciate the work ahead. We will have these budget discussions, and I really hope, members of council, that you can support this initiative. Thank you.
Your Worship, he didn't tell me how he came up with that figure.
Oh, yeah. Councillor Woolley, do you want to just answer that question?
What figure?
Where did the
It was asked and answered.
Where did the 10 million and 10 million come from?
Oh, I explained that when Councillor Sutherland asked that question previously.
I thought you had.
Closed.
All right. So thank you very much. Let's open the e-vote on this, please.
Your Worship,
Yes.
Worship, before you open the vote, can you call the last, no, maybe you can't.
No, I can. You want me to call the last be it resolved separately?
No, I want the last comma from with an assessment.
No, I don't think I can do that. I think that amendment's already passed. So, all right, so I'm going to call the whole thing. Open the e-vote, please. I know we're going to need a roll call, but I kind of wanted this one to be an official e-vote as well. Imagine that. Call the roll, please.
Calling the roll, Councillor Woolley.
Yes.
Councillor Carra.
Was my name called? Because my phone just went blank.
Sorry, yes. Councillor Carra on the roll call.
My vote is yes.
Thank you. Councillor Chahal.
Yes.
Councillor Chu.
No.
Councillor Collier-Cart.
No.
Councillor Davison.
Yes.
Councillor Demong.
No.
Councillor Farkas.
No.
Councillor Farrell.
Yes.
Councillor Gondek.
Yes.
Councillor Keating.
Yes.
Councillor Maglioka.
No.
Councillor Sutherland.
Yes.
Mayor Nenshi.
Yes.
That is carried 9-5, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Folks, we are not done yet. because we had said that we would deal with item 7.3 from the consent agenda in conjunction with this item. So Councillor Carra, can I please ask you to move item 7.3 out of CPS? Councillor Collier-Urquhart, perhaps I can ask you to second it.
I'm delighted to move it.
Thank you very much. This is the item
Would
about...
you like me to can I give a little bit of an opening, or is that
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go
hour?
ahead. I was going to do it, but go
All
ahead.
right. Well, no. You go. You go then.
Oh, I was simply going to say...
I'm
I was simply going to say that this is the item that went to CPS last week. I think it went through unanimously. And it is about accessing the previously earmarked funds on community action on mental health and addiction. Administration had come to us and said, as a red tape reduction exercise, can you please go ahead and approve the funding so that we don't always have to be coming back to CPS? We had a good conversation about it at committee, and committee agreed that that was probably the right way to go. Again, this is one-time money, not base money. How is that, Councillor Carra?
It's all right. It's all right.
Okay.
Yeah, and Councillor Woolley should second this.
Councillor Woolley, okay. All right, is there any debate on this? All right, seeing none, can you open the e-vote on this, please?
Councillor Woolley?
Yes, sorry, having problems here with my internet.
We have all the votes, Your Worship.
Thank you. Can you display the results, please? Well, he didn't say more than 3 were opposed. All right, and that is carried 12-2 with councillors with 2 councillors opposed, whoever they are. With councillors Collier-Urquhart and Demong opposed. And that is carried. Thank you very much. All right. Before we go, Councillor Sutherland, you had a request?
Yes, Your Worship. I didn't realize on the vote in 11 communities it was 13-1. I thought I had pushed the yes, but it shows that I pushed no. And I'd like to change my vote to yes, because that's what I thought I actually voted.
Thank you. Is there general consent to allow Councillor Sutherland to change his vote on that item? All right, hearing no objection, that is done. Don't do it. I don't know about you, I'm a little tired. So good luck at PUD in the morning. We will see you all at 1 o'clock.